I'm Dan Gross, and welcome to this Spotlight special of the Rochester Indie Musician Spotlight. I'm sitting here with Kristen Shiner McGuire and Dean Keller of the Rita Collective. That ensemble is rounded out by Kyle Vock on bass and Joe Parker on drums. And for this very special concert that's coming up, they're also joined by Spotlight alumni Ben Proctor on vocals and banjo. Guys, thanks for joining me today.
Great to be here tonight.
This episode is brought to you by Bernunzio Uptown Music, Bop Shop Records, and Row Photo. Bernunzio Uptown Music, located in Rochester's East End, has been providing Rochester and the world with quality vintage, new, and used string instruments since 1976. Bernunzio also offers concerts, workshops, and jam sessions. This season we're in this warm, local, and creative space, Bop Shop Records. Located right outside the city at 1460 Monroe Avenue, Bop Shop Records is your Rochester home for blues, classic rock, jazz, and Americana roots music in vinyl for the past 35 years. Row Photo is your one-stop shop for photo, home theater installation, audio, and accessory needs. For 3 generations since 1898, Row Photo is there for you with second-to-none customer service. Stop by Row Photo's 2 convenient locations today.
So let's do just a little bit of background. Can you tell us about your sort of early days in music and how you came to the spot you currently are? Kristen, let's start with you.
Oh my gosh, boy, that's a pretty long trajectory, but
A little bit.
about 50 years ago I started learning the snare drum, and I gradually learned all the percussion instruments. Went to college, got 2 degrees in percussion performance, and in between those 2 I went to Japan to study marimba with a great artist, Keiko Abe. So I especially love the marimba, and so when Dean asked me to play marimba in this group, it was a really wonderful fit. And it also gave me a chance to branch out and improvise more than I had been up to that point.
So you'd been a classically trained percussionist. You didn't have any jazz experience prior to this.
I had a lot of jazz experience.
Okay, just not
a lot of
official jazz.
As a drum set player,
Right.
I played 30 years. I played drum set and sang at the same time. Sang the Ella Fitzgerald vocals. So I've been a vocalist and drummer, but didn't do a lot of improvising on the mallet keyboard instruments until this wonderful opportunity. So it's sort of a blending of my backgrounds and talents, and then it stretches me a little more.
Cool. So you are technically play marimba for this group, or is it vibes?
Marimba.
Okay.
Yes, because you can't make me carry more than one instrument at the same time to a gig.
So you just had to pick one.
I had to pick one.
Because vibes are more typically the instrument we associate with jazz. I know you guys aren't. We can talk about what exactly the Rita Collective is later. Yeah. But the marimba just seemed to be a better fit for what the group was looking to do.
And we're not just jazz, and there are lots more opportunities to play lower notes because it's a bigger range.
Right.
So it's got more versatility, I think, for this kind of group.
Cool. So, Dean, let's go to you for a little bit. I just learned a tasty little nugget from you that you went to school to be a recording engineer, but at some point you picked up a reed instrument along the way.
Yeah, so the beginning is when I was a school-age kid, and it's time to join the band. You get to pick your instrument. Well, I really wanted to play the saxophone, but
So did everyone else, Dean. It's okay.
But I have an uncle who was a maybe beginning professional musician, and he said you should really learn clarinet first. And so my mom listened to my uncle and made me play the clarinet, and so I started in 4th grade playing the clarinet, and it was okay. But I didn't like it enough to really want to practice it. And so really what made me the musician that I am is that I just, when I got the opportunity to switch instruments, they said, "Hey, Dean, how about playing tenor saxophone in the concert band?" "Sure, I'll do that." "Hey, the jazz band needs a bari sax player."
Ooh.
And I said, "Cool, I'll do that."
Yeah, that's what's hooking him.
Say yes to everything.
One of the coolest things that happened was after in my junior year, they needed a contrabass clarinet player. And I thought, contrabass clarinet, why not? That sounds cool. And that made me realize one really important thing. Because I focused on that instrument for a while, I actually wanted to practice that instrument. I got to go to the All-State, which I would have never been able to do as a B-flat clarinet player because I just wasn't that good.
Yeah.
But the contrabass clarinet was something I really got into. And I realized that if you have cool instruments, then you get cool gigs. And that's how I got my first professional gig, actually.
Yeah, and playing contrabass clarinet?
No, just being the guy who had the instrument. So... my first professional gig ever was with the Antonetti Orchestra playing salsa music. I was just out of college. I was a skinny little white kid. I'd never listened to salsa music. I'd never played salsa music. They called me 2 days before the Puerto Rican festival downtown.
Lord.
And they said, "You got a bari sax, right?" And I said, "Yes, I do." And they said, "Good, you got the gig." So I showed up. I never saw the music until I walked on stage.
Wow.
And skinny white kid in front of 3,000 Puerto Ricans, and he goes, and it's like off to the races. I'm like, okay, and I made it to the end of the gig, and they called me back, and that was the beginning of being a professional
That's
musician.
great.
That was
That's
good. So, by the way your eyes lit up when they asked for the lower instruments is the same way my eyes lit up when my 7th grade jazz band director said, "Do you want to play bass trombone?" And that was it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
After that. So, I know the feeling. We'll come back around a little bit to what the Rita Collective does exactly. Looking at it's a really eclectic group of instruments, and so if you can, Chris, let's start with you. If you can sort of tell us what the flexibility of the marimba allows you to do, because when you think of a typical, I know. Well, again, we'll get to how you guys combine jazz and all this other stuff.
Right.
But what does the marimba as an instrument allow you to do that may be something similar, that performs in a similar rhythmic and melodic and harmonic role like guitar or piano can or can't do?
Oh, I see. Well, the first thing that comes to mind is it has a beautiful tone color. It's unusual. It's a wooden tone color. And it's a cross between a percussive instrument and a melodic instrument. And also when I use 4 mallets, I can play harmony. So I can comp chords, in a staccato way. I can roll, so I can make a sustained sound. I can play an accompaniment and a melody. So it does have a lot of versatility. And then I can change tone colors also I use different types of mallets. Once in a while, I'll turn the mallet over and play with the opposite end or something, or change the type, like with some extra little splashy sounds on it. So there is a lot of variety, but there are also some challenges in that it doesn't have like the sustain of a piano. So I have to think of different ways to change the sound, or maybe give the sustained notes to the bass or something like that. So we're always working on the orchestration, and I'm always changing octaves to change the tone color, which is helpful.
That's a really good point, because the one thing that kind of makes the Rita Collective's orchestration work is the bass clarinet is a very flexible instrument, especially for being something that's kind of based in the lower end. So can you talk about what about the bass clarinet allows it to function in this group?
I guess the reason why I love the bass clarinet is because it's the sound that you can create can be so dark and haunting and beautiful. And I guess the part of the bass clarinet that I love, that richness, is also a challenge for that instrument. And one of the reasons why the Rita Collective works the way that it does is because it doesn't. It's not loud.
Right.
You can't show up on a jam session with a bass clarinet unamplified, because you'll be drowned out by the ride cymbal.
Right.
It just won't happen. And so I put the Rita Collective together basically so I could explore improvising on the bass clarinet without turning it into a tenor saxophone. I didn't want to do that. So I really wanted to maintain that rich and dark quality that you can get on the instrument by playing at a volume and sensitive to that instrument. And the cool thing about the bass clarinet with the orchestral one that I have is that it's got a 5-octave range. So I can actually play lower than a baritone saxophone. And I can play up into the upper register of what a B-flat clarinet would do, with some extended technique stuff. So it's actually really cool to be able to do that, and to be able to use those different registers to create different feelings. Like there are some tunes that we do where I really focus on all low register stuff, really just to keep that sort of warm, richness about it. And there are other times when it's just nice to be able to reach up into those higher notes and just kind of peek out over the top. It's a beautiful instrument with so many versatile ways you can use it.
Yeah.
One of the problems with it is because it is what it is. It's really, really hard to improvise on. So that's actually one of the reasons why I started the group was about 8 years ago. Right about the time I got married, I started thinking about changing my life around and doing things in a different way, and really thought that if I could choose one instrument to really focus on, what would I do and what would I try to do with it? And bass clarinet was one of those ones that just kept coming back to me. I had played in Dave Ravello's group for years at that point, and I realized that I never really took the time to learn how to improvise on bass clarinet. So I thought,
we had all those great parts written out for you already.
Yeah, and I thought, I might as well start. There's no more excuses. Just start learning how to do it.
Cool.
And I don't know why I'm launching into this story already, but so
okay.
the beginning of the Rita Collective really was.
Well, you're reading my mind. That was my next question.
The
So
beginning-
let's roll into it.
So the beginning of it really was I wanted to improvise on bass clarinet. I started looking for examples of other guys that would improvise on bass clarinet, and there's the guys like Eric Dolphy and Bob Mintzer and Chris Potter that all are monsters, right?
Right.
But there aren't many other people that do it. It's a really select few. But I found this one recording that just completely changed my world, and that's what I named the group after. So the recording is an ECM recording called "The Astounding Eyes of Rita" by a Tunisian oud player named Anwar Braham, and his band is Anwar on oud, Klaus Gessing on bass clarinet, who's an Austrian bass clarinet player, Bjorn Meyer on electric bass. I can't remember the percussionist's name. I'm embarrassed. I can't remember, but a hand percussionist.
We'll get it in post. We'll put a nice little subscript there for you.
Thanks. But I found it on YouTube, and I just and the next day I went to the bop shop and ordered the record.
Man.
Interesting.
And that's it.
And that's it. And then I started transcribing the record, and I thought, well, I should get some players to play this music. And after several failed attempts, we finally arrived at the right group of people.
Yeah.
Finding Kristen was honestly, it was because I exhausted all the options of trying to find a string player, guitar or someone else who would play like an oud.
Okay.
And so I finally gave up on finding an oud replacement.
Right.
And I said, well, just who would I want to be in this group?
Right.
And then I thought, well, Kristen was a great vibes player, so let's see what that sounds like.
Is that how he pitched this group to you, by the way? Is like, I need something to imitate an oud? Or was he a little more tactful
Well, not
than
exactly.
that?
No, I think you mentioned Middle Eastern music and marimba. So I'm half Lebanese already. So, and I know a little bit about the doumbek. So I've got some sort of connection to the Middle East and being able to, improvise on the marimba, one of my favorite instruments. That's how he pitched it. And I was like, yes. I didn't even ask any more questions. I did want to interject a couple
Of
things.
course.
You said one thing. You said it's difficult to improvise on the bass clarinet. I have no idea that it's difficult because you make it sound so easy. So I didn't even know it was difficult. I just take it for granted that you're doing it and it's simple. The other thing is, way back in grad school at Eastman, for my graduate recital, I wrote a duo for bass clarinet and marimba in 1982. And it's now published, and we put a couple of those pieces on the album.
Yeah,
but
very
already back then, when I was studied a little bit of composition, just because I was fortunate to study with one of the faculty, I just decided that I thought those two timbres would sound good together. So this is sort of like revisiting that. Something came back in full circle.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's like coming back to an old friend. Just,
Yeah.
oh, I get to come back to this. This
So
is nice.
it was interesting. So several things resonated when Dean asked me.
And
It wasn't simple.
So I'll paraphrase, a little bit on, I think, the tagline for Rita Collective. It's kind of a world chamber group with a jazz slant. Did I paraphrase that?
That's
okay?
pretty close.
Yeah.
So, and you mentioned sort of the ideology and the original idea you had for this group is inspired by this deep cut ECM oud recording. And so for you, how do you develop that music? Where do you base your repertoire? How do you kind of go about composing music for this?
It started with that Middle Eastern sound, and
Right.
I really thought to myself, there's some things about this, the openness, the quality of that music that really lends itself to what we do.
Yeah.
And from there, it was really just me kind of sitting around listening to a bunch of things that I really love and thinking, well, how could I make this work for our instrumentation? And we have several things in the book that did not work out so well and will probably never be played again. But we ended up, I think, finding like a handful of it pulling from many different places. We have African folk tunes that we have arrangements of. We have some, jazz tunes that we've pulled into our book. Kyle brought a really nice Jay Anderson tune to the band, which really is fun for us to play. And one of the things that I really like to do is I like to do arrangements of pop tunes, like that everyone knows, but not tell them what it is. So
Right. We even have we have
That's
a Beatles, and then we have a Rage Against the Machine tune as well. So it's
we
quite
have
eclectic.
the last one I added is an Ed Sheeran tune. That tune, "The Shape of You,"
Yeah.
and the lyrics are just god awful.
Yes.
Yeah,
Well, it has to be ubiquitous, so it has to be ubiquitously terrible.
So on our page that I wrote for the band, it says, The title is "I'd Rather Not Say," and the subtitle is "Because the Lyrics Are That Bad."
Nice.
But the really cool thing about it is it's got a really nice groove to it. It's got a couple of really nice hooks that I was able to use in an arrangement to sort of use as a springboard for a drum solo. And I did a little reworking of the melody to make it a little solo for the bass and bass clarinet.
Cool.
So they're really fun to play, and it's nice to have the versatility with these players to be able to basically put anything in front of them and make it work.
Speaking of great players, Ben Proctor, we all know and love him as kind of like one of the lead men of the Crooked North. And all jokes aside, the banjo is a beautiful instrument. I will go on record and I will say that. I don't care what jokes are coming. That is what I believe. And he's a great songwriter as well.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And
Yeah.
Sure is.
I mean, I think I literally let out like a yelp of excitement when I saw this. I was just so pumped for this to happen. And coming in the rehearsal, you heard a little bit of it before the interview started. It's much more of a natural pairing than you would have thought. So can you tell us both why you think the banjo fits in this setting so well, and then the rep you're playing and how you're putting it all together?
I haven't really formulated why. It just felt magical and right when he showed up with his tunes, and we had recordings ahead of time. But I don't know. I think our music spans so many different styles, but there's sort of a folk element maybe at the root of a lot of things that we do. And the colors of the banjo, that sort of spreads out the palette. You know, there's melody, there's sustain, there's a sharp little attack. There's all sorts of other things texture-wise, and you mix it in with the rest of this, and it turns into something new.
It's really cool.
Yeah.
One of the things about the banjo that a lot of people don't know is it actually originated in Africa. And when I was thinking, I've been doing these sort of guest artists with the Rita Collective things for a while. We've been lucky enough to have Herb Smith, and we had Maury Rosenberg from Hypnotic Clambake.
Right. Accordion.
That's right.
So we've had some really great experiences. But I was thinking about, well, what can I do that's a little bit different? And when I came across Ben Proctor, I was like, man, there's some really cool connections here. Yeah. So that's sort of the fact that we have some African folk tunes and the banjo started in Africa. It seemed a natural fit to kind of put those two together. And the program we put together is actually really cool. It's kind of tracing the history of the banjo as it developed. So starting with the African folk tunes, we have a couple of Middle Eastern tunes because there's some variations on the banjo in the Middle East. And then the banjo came over to North America with the slave trade, and so that and it kind of became an iconic bluegrass instrument. So we're going to do some traditional bluegrass tunes. And we're also going to include some more modern things too. So we're going to include some of Ben's original tunes. One of my original tunes that I wrote that sounds amazing with banjo. It wasn't part of my conception when I wrote it, but man, it sounds great when Ben plays it.
Yeah.
And of course, you can't do an improvisational show with banjo without doing a Bela Fleck tune. So
of course,
we got one of those on there too. So it's going to be a really, really fun night of music.
Well, I'm sure Ben was grinning ear to ear when you told him he could shred over some Bela Fleck. All right, guys, thank you so much for your time. You can watch the Rita Collective Sunday, October 15th at Lovin Cup. Guys, thanks for your time.
Thank you very
Dan.
much.
1, 2, 3. Married me a wife, she gave me trouble. out into the cold.